Looking back, the part that chills me most is not that he texted me to say he was still in love with his ex. It is how lightly he did it, like he was dropping a stone down a well and waiting for me to listen to the echo on my own. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 28 years old. I work the kind of office job that turns weekdays into repeating blocks of exhaustion. Emails, deadlines, cold coffee, fluorescent lights reflected in elevator doors at the end of the day. I've never been someone who makes a spectacle out of everything. I always believed that if two people had been together long enough, seriously enough, then no matter how badly things went, they would at least give each other the minimum dignity of honesty and respect. I believed that for 2 years with Evan. The text came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had already changed into sleep clothes. I was half under the blanket, lying on my side, idly scrolling through my phone to quiet my mind before bed. My apartment was silent. Outside the window, the parking lot lights washed the ceiling in a soft orange haze. Everything was ordinary, in the kind of way that should have protected the night from becoming a memory. Then my screen lit up. His name at the top of the thread. I still remember the exact feeling I had when I opened it. Not dread, not suspicion, just the automatic softness you feel when the person you love texts late. Then I read it. I need to be honest with you about something. I've been thinking a lot lately, and I realized I'm still in love with my ex. I can't help it. I've tried to fight it, but the feelings never really went away. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. I blinked and looked again, like maybe if I stared at the words long enough, they would rearrange themselves into something less brutal. They didn't. 2 years together. 2 years of dinners with each other's families, weekend trips, conversations about moving in together next spring, little routines that had begun to feel permanent. Reduced to a midnight confession, like he was canceling a subscription. I didn't cry right away. That was the strangest part. I sat up and leaned back against the headboard. My heart was not racing. It just felt heavy. A coldness moved slowly down my spine, not sharp, but deep. The kind of cold you feel when you realize a door has been closing for a long time, and you are only now hearing the lock click into place. What Evan didn't know was that I already knew about his ex-girlfriend. More specifically, I knew why he was suddenly realizing his feelings now. 3 days earlier, I had received a wedding invitation that had not been mailed directly to me. It was forwarded through a friend of mine who happened to work with the fiancé of Evan's ex. I stood in my kitchen holding that cream-colored card, staring at the elegant names printed side by side, and feeling like I was holding a piece of information I was never supposed to see. Evan's ex-girlfriend was getting married. She was marrying her best friend Nolan. And what stayed with me was not just the fact itself, but the fact that Evan had never mentioned it. Not once. Not casually. Not in passing. No awkward comment. No strange silence followed by, "Something weird happened today." Nothing. That was too strange to ignore. If your boyfriend learns that his ex is getting married, especially when there had clearly been history there, that is the kind of thing you mention. Unless the news hit a place inside you that you were trying very hard not to expose. So when I got a text at 11:47 p.m. telling me he was still in love with her, the pieces did not drift together slowly. They slammed into place. This was not love returning. It was jealousy. It was panic. It was the reaction of a man who had just realized that the door he had always assumed might someday reopen was about to be sealed shut forever. I typed back slowly. "Thanks for telling me." His reply came almost immediately. "So, you understand?" I stared at that line longer than I want to admit. Understand what? That after 2 years with me, his heart still belongs somewhere else? Or that he expected me to be calm, kind, mature, and available while he unraveled, and to do it without demanding that he pay any real price for blowing up our relationship? The typing bubble appeared again. "You've always been a good person. I just need a little time to figure things out. Maybe we can talk tomorrow." That was when I became fully awake. Not because the pain deepened, but because I understood exactly what he was doing. He was not breaking up with me. He was building a vague bridge between us, so that if whatever was happening on the other side did not work out, he could still walk back later. I did not answer with words first. I opened my photos and found the picture I had taken of the invitation 3 days earlier. Cream paper, soft script, the bride's name, the name of the woman he had just admitted he still loved. I sent him the picture. Then I added one line. "Interesting timing for your feelings. When were you planning to tell me about this?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I could practically see him sitting bolt upright somewhere, eyes wide, mind scrambling now that he understood he was not the only one in the conversation holding information. 2 minutes passed. Finally, he texted, "Where did you get that?" I laughed under my breath. It was a small sound, thin and joyless. "Does it matter?" His answer came right away. "Of course it matters. How do you even have that?" I set my phone down for a few seconds, inhaled slowly, then picked it back up. "Your ex is marrying Nolan next month. You knew that. You didn't tell me. And suddenly now you're telling me you still love her. That isn't love, Evan. That's jealousy." His next message took longer. "You don't understand. It's complicated." I stared at that and felt something tired settle into me. Complicated is what people say when the truth is too ugly to say plainly. This was not complicated. This was obvious. No, it isn't. You found out she's about to belong to someone else, someone close to her, and suddenly your feelings became urgent. That's not love. That's selfishness. This time he called. My phone vibrated in my hand. I let it ring out. He called again. I declined again. Then another message came in. "Please just talk to me. I know how this looks, but it's not what you think." I called him back. Not because I wanted comfort, not because I wanted closure, because I wanted to hear what his voice sounded like when he knew he had been seen clearly. He answered on the first ring. "Claire, thank you for—" "Then explain it," I cut in. "Explain how, right after finding out your ex is about to marry her best friend, you suddenly realized you're still in love with her after 2 years with me." Silence. I could hear him breathing. Finally, he said quietly, "I didn't know how to process it. Finding out hurt more than I expected." "Was telling me supposed to be honesty?" I asked. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. "Or were you using me as emotional support while you figured out whether you had a chance to sabotage a wedding?" "I would never do that." "Really? You hid the engagement from me for days. You texted me at midnight to say you love someone else, and you still didn't actually break up with me. You just asked for time. You want to keep me here, don't you? In case she doesn't turn around and come back for you." "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He did not answer right away. And sometimes silence is the cleanest answer a person can give. I closed my eyes for 1 second. When I opened them, everything inside me felt suddenly and painfully clear. "We're done, Evan. Claire, don't do this. You can't end 2 years over one text." I laughed then, and the sound came out thinner, sharper, more bitter than before. "You just told me you love another woman. You ended it." I was being honest. "No," I said. "You were panicking, and you thought I'd stay still and wait for you to decide what to do with me. You know I care about you." "Care is not enough," I said softly, "and being somebody's backup plan is not love." Then I hung up, blocked his number, set my phone face down on the nightstand, turned off the lamp. Lying in the dark, I honestly thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The first few days after that were quiet enough to feel unreal. No late-night calls from unknown numbers, no dramatic email, no flowers on my doorstep, nothing. Just the ordinary sounds of my own life settling back into place, the hum of my refrigerator, the sharp click of my deadbolt at night, the dull rhythm of my heels against the lobby tile when I came home from work. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like the eerie calm that comes right after a power outage, when the whole house is still dark, and you know the worst part is not the silence, but the waiting. I told myself that maybe Evan had enough shame left not to push it any further. I should have known better. On the third evening, at exactly 7 o'clock, someone knocked on my apartment door. Not the hesitant kind of knock from a neighbor who needs to borrow something. Not the light tap of a delivery driver already halfway down the hall. 3 firm, deliberate knocks, the kind that announce a purpose. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I recognized immediately. Evan's older sister. I had met her a handful of times over the 2 years we were together. She was polished, protective, and always spoke with the confidence of someone who had already decided what everyone else should feel before they opened their mouths. I opened the door, but only halfway. She stood there with her arms folded, expensive handbag on one shoulder, mouth set in a line that suggested she had come to perform a duty she found exhausting, but necessary. "We need to talk," she said. That alone almost made me laugh. "We really don't." Her jaw tightened. "Claire, please, this doesn't have to be ugly." I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and looked at her. "Then that's probably a conversation you should be having with your brother." Her eyes flashed with irritation, but she pushed past it. "He told me what happened." "I'm sure he did." "He was confused. He was emotional. He found out something upsetting and panicked." I stared at her for a moment, almost impressed by how neatly she had packaged it. Confused. Emotional. Upsetting. Every word chosen to make his choices sound accidental, harmless, almost sympathetic. "He texted his girlfriend of 2 years at midnight to say he was still in love with another woman," I said. "That's not confusion. That's a decision. She exhaled hard through her nose, like I was making things harder than they needed to be. He was trying to be honest. No, he was trying to keep a door open. She frowned. What does that even mean? It means he didn't break up with me. He didn't say, this is over. He said he needed time to figure things out. Translation? He wanted me waiting around while he spiraled over his ex getting married. Her expression shifted then, just slightly. Not enough to become doubt, but enough to show I had touched a nerve. She was his first serious love, his sister said. Finding out she's marrying someone close to her hit him hard. I gave a short, incredulous laugh. Do you hear yourself? What? You're standing on my doorstep asking me to be compassionate because your brother is heartbroken that another woman is getting married. Her face hardened. You're being deliberately cold. No, I said, I'm being accurate. For a second, neither of us spoke. I could hear a television somewhere down the hall, a child laughing in another apartment. Life going on normally all around this conversation, which somehow made it feel even more absurd. She uncrossed her arms and said in a lower voice, he really cared about you. Something inside me went still at that. Cared. Not loved, not chose, not valued enough to protect. Cared. That's the problem, I said quietly. He cared about me just enough to keep me around while he never got over someone else. Her mouth pressed thin again. You don't know that. I looked at her directly. I know he hid the engagement from me. I know he told me he was still in love with his ex the second it became clear she was permanently unavailable. I know he expected me to understand. That's more than enough. She shifted her weight. You could at least hear him out. He had his chance. He made a mistake. I shook my head. He made a choice. The difference seemed to annoy her more than anything. Some people can tolerate cruelty more easily than precision. She glanced past me into my apartment, then back at me. You know, forgiveness is part of being in an adult relationship. So is not confessing love for somebody else at midnight. Her lips parted like she had a reply ready, but nothing came out. For the first time since she arrived, she looked uncertain. I took advantage of it. If you came here to tell me I owe your brother compassion, I said, I don't. If you came here to tell me to give him another shot, absolutely not. And if you came here hoping I'd help him feel less guilty about what he did, that's not happening either. She stared at me for a second longer, then stepped back. You're harsher than I thought, she said. Maybe, I answered. Or maybe I'm just the first person in this situation who isn't pretending this is romantic. She left without saying goodbye. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there for a moment with my hand still on the knob. Harsher than she thought. That phrase followed me into the kitchen while I reheated leftovers I no longer wanted. It followed me while I rinsed my fork, while I changed into a t-shirt, while I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to decide whether I looked different now than I had a week ago. I didn't. That was another strange part of betrayal. You expect visible damage, some external proof that something fundamental has shifted, but most of the time it's internal, a private fracture. You look exactly the same while your understanding of the last 2 years rearranges itself under your feet. The next day I got a message on Instagram. It came just after lunch while I was half listening to a meeting and pretending to care about a spreadsheet on my screen. I glanced down at my phone and saw a name I recognized immediately. Lila, Evan's ex-girlfriend, the woman at the center of all of this. For one strange second, I just stared at the notification. Then I opened it. Hi. I know this is probably weird, but I heard what happened. I'm really sorry. I had no idea he still felt that way. If you're willing, I think there are some things you should know. I read the message twice. There was no smugness in it, no defensiveness, just discomfort, apology, and something that felt like reluctant responsibility. I answered more cautiously than warmly. Not your fault. What things? Her reply came quickly. Would you be open to coffee tomorrow morning? I'd rather not explain this over DM. I almost said no. Every instinct I had told me not to get pulled deeper into other people's emotional wreckage. But another part of me, the part that had been replaying every detail of the last week, trying to understand how much of my relationship had been real, needed answers more than it needed distance. So I said yes. We met the next morning at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. I recognized her from photos long before she waved me over. She was pretty in a way that didn't seem fully intentional. Minimal makeup, oversized sweater, tired eyes that suggested she hadn't slept much either. There was no triumph in her face when I sat down. If anything, she looked embarrassed to be there. Thank you for coming, she said. I set my cup down. You said there were things I should know. She nodded once, then looked out the window before speaking, like it was easier if she didn't have to watch my reaction in real time. Evan and I dated about 4 years ago, she said. For a little over a year. It ended badly. I waited. She gave a humorless smile. That's a cleaned up version, actually. It ended badly because I found out he was texting someone else and lying about it. A familiar coldness moved through me. Pattern, I thought. Of course. He kept saying it didn't mean anything, she continued. That he just liked the attention. That it wasn't serious. That he only wanted me. But by the time I found out, the damage was already done. I ended it. And he didn't take that well, I said. Her expression tightened. No, he didn't. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, though I'm not sure she had actually taken a sip. For almost a year after we broke up, she said, he kept trying to get me back. Texts, calls, long messages about soulmates and timing and how nobody understood us. He showed up at my apartment twice. Once at my job. Nothing violent, but a lot. Too much. I felt my stomach drop. And then I blocked him everywhere. The way she said it was calm, flat, rehearsed. The tone of someone who had explained a situation too many times and no longer had the energy to dramatize it. I looked at her and suddenly understood something I hadn't let myself consider before. Evan had not simply carried a torch. He had built a shrine. She went on. A little over a year later, my best friend Nolan and I started dating. That made the final piece settle. Nolan, the man whose name I had seen on the invitation opposite hers in clean script and wedding gold ink. And Evan knew? I asked. She nodded. He found out pretty early. Publicly, he acted fine about it. Told mutual friends he was happy for us. That he'd moved on. That he wanted the best for me. But every now and then there'd be some comment. Some weird little dig. Something passive-aggressive. Like what? She gave a brittle laugh. Like asking Nolan if it was strange dating someone who knew all my baggage, or telling me I looked nervous at parties when I was just standing there existing. Things small enough to deny, sharp enough to land. I sat back slowly. There it was again. Not grief, control. How long have you and Nolan been engaged? I asked. 5 weeks away from the wedding now, she said. He proposed 3 months ago. And that's when Evan started acting strange? She let out a breath. Stranger. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. There's something else, she said. My hands went cold before she even turned the screen toward me. It was the night before he texted you. On the screen was a message thread. Evan's name at the top. I scanned the exchange quickly. Evan, are you really sure about this? Then another. I'm not trying to make things difficult. I just think maybe there are things you should think through before you marry him. Then one more, sent 20 minutes later. You know, not everything between us was nothing. I looked up sharply. He sent that to you? Her mouth tightened. Yes. And this was the night before he texted me? Yes. The coffee shop seemed to go oddly quiet around us, though I knew that wasn't true. Cups still clinked. Milk still steamed behind the counter. Someone at a nearby table laughed at something on a laptop. But inside me, everything narrowed to a single, ugly line of logic. He had reached out to her first. He had tested the door. And when it didn't open, he came back to me. Lila must have seen the realization move across my face because she nodded once with grim sympathy. I told him I was absolutely sure, she said, that he needed to respect my relationship and stop contacting me. He never replied after that. Then, apparently, he texted you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I thought of that midnight message again. I need to be honest. I can't help it. Maybe we can talk tomorrow. Not confession. Fallback. Not vulnerability. Damage control. So let me get this straight, I said at last, my voice quieter than I expected. He tried to rattle your engagement first. And when that didn't work, he came to me with some tragic truth about still being in love with you. Lila looked down at her cup. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You didn't do this. I still feel awful, she said. I knew he was weird about the wedding, but I didn't realize how far he was spiraling. Nolan didn't either. We both thought he'd just finally move on. People always think that about obsession, I thought. They mistake silence for healing. I looked at the screenshot again in my mind. Those messages asking if she was sure, as if he had any right to put his doubt into the room with her joy. Does Nolan know? I asked. Yes, she said immediately. I showed him everything. That answer told me more about their relationship than any romantic story could have. No secrecy, no games, no hidden ache waiting for the right moment to poison the foundation. I nodded slowly. I'm glad. She looked relieved by that, maybe because she had expected bitterness from me. But the only person who had lied to me was Evan. Lila hesitated, then said softly, He probably did care about you, in his way. I almost laughed. That phrase again, in his way. The language people use when ordinary words are too honest. His way wasn't good enough, I said. She didn't argue. We sat there a little longer after that, two women joined by the same man's unresolved damage, though in different roles and at different times. There was something bleakly intimate about it. Not friendship, not exactly, but recognition. When we stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly. "For what it's worth," she said, "you weren't stupid." I looked at her. She held my gaze and added, "People like Evan are very good at looking settled when they're really just waiting." That stayed with me the whole drive home. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I knew two things with complete certainty. First, I had never been the center of his story. And second, he was not done making a mess of everyone else's. I didn't hear from Evan for 2 more days after the coffee meeting with Lila. That silence felt different now. Before, it had been uncertain. Now it felt more like the quiet after someone has tried a door and discovered it is locked. He had tried Lila first. She had shut it. Then he had tried me. I had shut it too. The rational part of my brain said that should be the end of it. Unfortunately, obsession has never been particularly respectful of rational conclusions. It was close to 10 that night when someone knocked on my door again. This time I didn't even need to check the peephole. There's a rhythm to certain knocks when you've heard them enough times. The way a person's hand hits wood, the spacing between each rap, the impatient weight behind it. Still, I looked. Evan stood in the hallway. His hair looked unwashed. His jacket was half-zipped, like he had thrown it on without thinking. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much in the last few nights. For a split second, some old instinct inside me softened. Then I remembered the screenshot of the messages he had sent Lila. The softness disappeared. I opened the door only a few inches. "What are you doing here?" His shoulders sagged a little, like he had been bracing for a worse reaction. "Claire, please, I just need 5 minutes." "No, please. You've already said everything you needed to say." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." His voice cracked slightly. "I know you talked to Lila." That caught me off guard for a moment. "How?" "She told Nolan," he said. "Nolan told a couple people. Word spreads." "Of course it does. In friend groups that overlap, secrets are less like locked boxes and more like open windows." "Good," I said calmly. "Then you know I know everything." His face tightened. "It's not what you think." I let out a slow breath. "You tried to talk your ex out of marrying someone else," I said. "When that didn't work, you texted me that you still loved her. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I was hurting. Everyone hurts." I didn't know what to do. "You could have talked to a therapist," I said. "Or a friend, or taken a walk, or written it in a journal like a normal person processing their emotions. Instead, you told your girlfriend you were in love with someone else." I was trying to be honest. "You were trying to keep your options open." The words landed harder than I expected. His expression shifted from pleading to defensive in an instant. "That's not fair." "It's extremely fair." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Can I come inside?" "No, Claire." "You have 2 minutes," I said, "right there." The hallway light buzzed faintly above us. For a few seconds, he just stood there, like he was reorganizing the speech he had planned. "I never stopped loving her," he said finally. The bluntness of it almost impressed me. "Then why were you dating me for 2 years?" His eyes dropped to the carpet. "I thought I was over it." "Thought. I really believed I was." "And the moment you found out she was getting married, you realized you weren't." "Yes." The honesty might have sounded noble to someone who wasn't standing on the receiving end of it. To me, it sounded like an explanation for why I had just lost 2 years of my life. "You understand how that makes me feel, right?" I said. He looked up, confused. "How?" "Like I was a placeholder." His mouth opened immediately. "You weren't." "Evan, I mean it." "Evan," I repeated, slower now. "If Lila had texted you back and said she wasn't sure about the wedding, would you be standing here right now?" The question landed between us like a dropped plate. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. "You see," I said quietly. His voice came out rough. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is using someone as emotional scaffolding while you pine after somebody else." "I wasn't using you." "You absolutely were." He shook his head hard. "You're twisting this." "I'm clarifying it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that surprised me. "I did love you." "Did." Past tense. I felt something in my chest settle into a colder, more stable shape. "You loved how safe it was," I said. "That's not true. You loved that I was there, that I was stable, that I didn't make your life chaotic." "That's a good thing." "It is," I said, "but it's not the same thing as choosing someone first." His hands tightened into fists at his sides. "I came here to fix this." "You can't." "Yes, I can." "No," I said gently. "You can't." His voice rose slightly. "We've spent 2 years building something." "I built something." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I thought I was building a future," I said. "You were just building a waiting room." That hit. I could see it in the way his shoulders jerked back. That's not what this was. Then explain why the second you thought you might still have a chance with her, you detonated everything with me. I told you already, he said. It just hit me all at once. Exactly. What? If your feelings for her were that fragile, I said, then they were always there. He didn't respond. Instead, he said quietly, I'll go to therapy. I blinked. What? I'll fix it, he said quickly. I'll work through it. I'll block her everywhere. I'll do whatever it takes. You already blocked her once, remember? I said. 4 years ago. That didn't stick. This time will be different. Because now she's married? She's not married yet. The words came out before he could stop them. We both froze. The hallway seemed to shrink around us. I tilted my head slowly. Did you just hear yourself? He closed his eyes. That's not what I meant. Yes, I said softly. It is. Silence spread between us again. Then he whispered, Please don't throw us away. I almost smiled at that. Throw us away. As if I were the one discarding something precious instead of finally refusing to carry something broken. You told me you love someone else, I said. You can't unring that bell. I can try. I don't want you to try. His eyes widened. What? I don't want to be the person you settle for after the real thing becomes impossible. You're not settling. Evan! He didn't speak. We stood there for a long time. Finally, he said, almost desperately, I'll cut contact with both of them. That's not the point. I'll move. That's not the point either. Then what do you want from me? Nothing, I said. The words seemed to knock the air out of him. I want you to leave. For a moment, I thought he might argue again. Instead, he just stared at me. 2 years, he said hoarsely. Yes, that has to mean something. It did, I said. To me. I began to close the door. His hand lifted like he might stop it, but he didn't. The door shut with a soft click. For several seconds, I could hear him standing there on the other side. Then footsteps. Then silence. The next morning, I called my building manager and asked to have my locks changed. It felt excessive. It also felt necessary. Because by that point, I understood something very clearly. Evan had spent years refusing to accept closed doors. And people like that rarely stop after the first one. For a few days after Evan showed up at my apartment, things went strangely quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like the aftermath of a storm that had already ripped the roof off the house, leaving everything exposed to the sky. I changed the locks the next morning. The building manager didn't ask questions. He just nodded, replaced the cylinder, and handed me 2 new keys. Bad breakup? He asked casually while tightening the final screw. You could say that. He gave a sympathetic grunt and left. For the first time in a week, I felt a small sense of control return. It lasted exactly 4 days. That was when the messages started. At first, it was subtle. A mutual friend texting to check in. Another sending a carefully worded message about how relationships can be complicated and people deserve grace during emotional moments. By the third message, the pattern became obvious. Evan had been talking. In his version of the story, he hadn't confessed love for another woman. He had been vulnerable. He had been honest. And I had overreacted. Apparently, the narrative making its rounds was that Evan had been struggling emotionally after hearing about his ex's upcoming wedding and had turned to me in a moment of raw honesty, only for me to shut him out coldly. I read one message from a friend named Tyler that summed it up neatly. He says he trusted you enough to be honest and you ended things immediately. That seems harsh. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I replied with one sentence. Did he mention the part where he tried to talk his ex out of marrying someone else the night before he texted me? The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. A minute later, Tyler responded. Wait, what? So I explained. Not dramatically, not angrily, just the facts. The messages to Lila, the midnight confession, the request for time to figure things out. The way he had never actually broken up with me because he had wanted to keep me as a fallback if his attempt to reopen the past failed. The reactions were almost identical across the board. Confusion, then silence, then quiet apologies. Most people are reasonable when the full picture finally lands in front of them. A few still stuck with Evan's version of events, but that told me more about them than it did about the situation. Those friendships faded quietly. I didn't mourn them. Then came the financial angle, which, to this day, is still the most ridiculous chapter of the entire ordeal. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I immediately realized who it was. Evan's sister. Claire, we need to settle some things between you and Evan. I sighed before replying. There's nothing to settle. Her response came instantly. Actually, there is. Evan contributed a lot to your relationship, and he deserves to be reimbursed for certain expenses. A moment later, another message arrived. This one contained a list. A literal list. I stared at it, blinking slowly. And half of a weekend trip we took last year. $400. A coffee maker he bought for my apartment, $85. Several dinners he paid for, estimated $600. Emotional labor, no number attached, just written there like an accusation. I read the list twice. Then I started laughing. Not angry laughter, the kind that escapes when something is so absurd your brain can't quite believe it's real. I screenshotted the entire conversation and sent it to a friend of mine who worked as a lawyer. His reply came back within 5 minutes. Tell him to stop watching bad breakup movies. None of that is legally enforceable. Gifts are gifts. Shared experiences aren't debts. The emotional labor line is almost impressive, though. That last message made me laugh again. Then I replied to Evan's sister. He can pick up the coffee maker, that's it. The answer came quickly. Fine, we'll come tomorrow evening. We. That word immediately raised my blood pressure. The next day at 6:30, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and found exactly what I expected. Evan, his sister, and their mother. 3 people standing in my hallway like they were arriving for a family intervention instead of retrieving an $85 coffee maker. His mother spoke first. We're here for Evan's things. I folded my arms lightly. He has a coffee maker here. He left other belongings, she said firmly. No, he didn't. Her eyebrows lifted. Excuse me? He never lived here, I said calmly. Any clothes he left behind are in that bag. I stepped aside and picked up a small garbage bag I had placed by the door. Inside were 2 shirts and a pair of jeans he had forgotten months ago. His sister looked offended. You put them in a trash bag? They're clothes, not museum artifacts. Evan stood slightly behind them, saying nothing. That was the strangest part. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even trying to argue. He just looked tired. His mother glanced at the bag, then back at me. And his toiletries? She demanded. What toiletries? He kept things here. He never lived here, I repeated. Travel-size shampoo and expired face wash went in the trash. Her expression changed instantly, like I had personally insulted her family lineage. You threw away his things? I shrugged. I threw away $3 drugstore shampoo. It's not exactly a war crime. Behind her, Evan finally spoke. Mom, it's fine. She ignored him. You could have at least been civil about this. I am being civil, I said. Civil means giving you the items that belong to him and asking you to leave peacefully. His sister stepped forward slightly. You're acting like he committed some unforgivable crime. He tried to talk another woman out of marrying someone else, I said. Then he told his girlfriend he loved that woman. If you're looking for a word to describe that behavior, crime might actually be generous. His sister's mouth snapped shut. For a moment, no one moved. Then I stepped back into the apartment, grabbed the coffee maker from the counter, and carried it to the door. Here. Evan took it quietly. His mother muttered something under her breath. I caught the word heartless. That one almost made me smile. They turned to leave. Just before they reached the elevator, Evan stopped. He looked back at me. For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to say something. Then his shoulders dropped slightly. I hope you know, he said quietly, that refusing to forgive people eventually ruins your own life. The statement hung in the hallway. His mother nodded approvingly. His sister looked satisfied, like that line was supposed to land as some kind of moral victory. I leaned against the doorframe and answered honestly, My life's actually doing pretty well. He held my gaze for another second. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. The doors slid closed. The hallway fell silent again. I shut the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead briefly against the cool wood. That should have been the end. It should have been the last awkward chapter of an ugly breakup. But there was still one thing left on the calendar. The wedding. And Evan was not finished trying to rewrite that story either. 3 weeks passed, long enough for the tension to settle into something dull and manageable. Work filled most of my days. Evenings were quieter than they had been in 2 years, but not unpleasantly so. I started cooking again instead of ordering takeout. I ran in the mornings before work. I read books I had half finished months earlier, while Evan and I had been busy planning weekend trips and hypothetical furniture layouts for an apartment we were never going to share. Life didn't snap back to normal. But it did move forward. The wedding was getting closer, though. That detail lived somewhere in the back of my mind like a ticking clock I wasn't supposed to hear. 5 weeks had become 3. 3 had become 1. Then, the night before the ceremony, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Lila. I answered immediately. Hey. Her voice was shaking. Claire, I'm really sorry to call this late. Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten. What happened? There was a pause on the line, followed by the faint sound of her breathing in carefully, like someone trying not to cry. He sent me a letter. For a moment, I didn't understand. Who? Evan? The room seemed to go still around me. A letter? Yes. Tonight? No, she said quietly. Yesterday. It arrived at my office this morning. My stomach dropped. He mailed it to your workplace? Yes. That detail told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't sent it to her home address because Nolan might see it. He had chosen the one place where he thought he could reach her privately. What did it say? I asked carefully. There was another pause. It was 3 pages long. 3 pages? I closed my eyes for a second. 3 pages of what? I asked. Memories, she said quietly. About our relationship, about things we used to do together, places we went, conversations we had. I could almost picture it. Evan's particular brand of emotional nostalgia, the way he liked to polish the past until it looked like something sacred instead of something that had ended for a reason. He wrote that he'd never really stopped loving me, she continued. That seeing the wedding coming up made him realize he couldn't stay silent anymore. Of course it did. What else? He asked if I was absolutely sure about marrying Nolan. The sentence came out small. Then she added something that made my jaw tighten. He included photos. Photos? Old ones, she said, from when we were together. I leaned back against the wall slowly. And the letter ended with his phone number and an invitation to talk before I make a permanent decision. The room felt very quiet. What did Nolan say? I asked. I showed him the letter the second I opened it. That answer didn't surprise me. It just confirmed that whatever Evan believed about the past, the present, belonged to two people who trusted each other enough not to hide things. How did he react? I asked. She laughed weakly. He was angry, not at me, at Evan. I could imagine that too. A man who had spent months planning a wedding doesn't usually appreciate someone trying to stage a last-minute emotional ambush. But he also said something else, she continued. What? He said he was glad I showed him immediately, because the only thing worse than a letter like that would have been secrets before a marriage. Smart man. And now? I asked. That's why I'm calling, she said quietly. There was a long silence before she spoke again. I don't know what to do about tomorrow. I frowned. What do you mean? He's supposed to be in the wedding. For a second I thought I had misheard. In the wedding? Yes. How? He's one of Nolan's groomsmen. I blinked slowly. The situation had just jumped from messy to surreal. He's in the wedding party, she repeated softly. He was supposed to stand up there during the ceremony. After sending you a love letter the day before your wedding? Yes. My brain struggled to process the level of audacity involved. And you only found out now? I asked. We didn't know about the letter until this morning. And what does Nolan want to do? He says Evan's not welcome anymore, she said. But if we kick him out now, people will ask questions. People are going to ask questions anyway, I said. She exhaled shakily. I know. Then she added something else. There's another problem. What? He wasn't just a groomsman. I waited. He was supposed to give a speech. Of course he was. Listen to me, I said gently. You can't let him anywhere near that ceremony. I know, she said quietly. But it's going to cause a scene. He already caused one. I just wanted tomorrow to be simple. I know. Her voice broke slightly. I've spent $30,000 on this wedding. My whole family flew in. Nolan's parents are here. Everything is already set up. I closed my eyes. $30,000. Months of planning. Years of friendship. All sitting on a fault line created by a man who refused to accept the end of a story he had already lost. You're not canceling your wedding because of him, I said firmly. I'm not. Good. But the speech, she said weakly. He doesn't get to give it. Silence. Then she said, You're right. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the edge of it. Text him tonight, I said. Tell him he's no longer part of the wedding party. And if he argues? He will. Then what? Then security handles it. There was a long pause. Finally, she said quietly, Okay. Okay? Yes. Her voice steadied slightly. I'll send the message now. We stayed on the phone while she did it. I could hear her typing, then the soft whoosh of the message sending. What did you say? I asked. She read it aloud. Your services as a groomsman are no longer needed. I've read the letter. Please do not come to the ceremony tomorrow. That seemed clear enough. We waited. 30 seconds passed. Then her phone buzzed. What did he say? I asked. Her voice sounded hollow. He says we're overreacting. Of course he did. And that he deserves to be there. I rubbed my forehead. He also says the letter was just closure. Closure, I repeated flatly. Yes. That word hung between us like a joke no one wanted to laugh at. Does Nolan want to reply? I asked. No, she said firmly. He blocked him. Good. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she whispered, Do you think he'll show up anyway? I thought about Evan standing in my hallway a few weeks earlier. About the way he had said she's not married yet. About the 3-page letter. About the photos. Yes, I said quietly. I do. Her breathing caught slightly. What do we do if he does? I answered honestly. Make sure he doesn't get inside. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, Thank you. For what? For telling me the truth about him. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. You figured that out yourself. No, she said. You just helped me stop pretending I hadn't already. We ended the call a few minutes later. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, staring out the dark window. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, it had turned into a defensive strategy meeting, all because one man couldn't accept the end of a story he had already lost. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet voice kept repeating the same thought. Evan wasn't going to stay away. The wedding was on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't attend. Not because I wasn't invited. Lila had actually insisted that I come if I wanted to, but because I already felt like I had been standing too close to the center of that disaster for too long. The day belonged to her and Nolan. They deserved at least one space where my history with Evan wasn't hovering in the background like a storm cloud. So instead, I stayed home. I went for a run that morning. Clean air, quiet streets, the steady rhythm of my feet hitting pavement. It helped more than I expected. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt calm, until my phone started buzzing. The first message came around 2 in the afternoon. It was from Tyler. "You were right." That was the entire message. I stared at it for a moment before typing back. "About what?" His response came immediately. "He showed up." Of course he did. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling for a second. "What happened?" The reply took longer this time. Then 3 messages arrived in quick succession. He came wearing a white shirt and jacket like he was part of the wedding party. Nolan's brother spotted him first. They stopped him at the entrance. I exhaled slowly. The scene practically wrote itself in my mind. Evan walking toward the venue with that determined, slightly frantic energy he always had when he thought he was about to fix something dramatic. The groomsmen already gathered, the families chatting inside, music starting somewhere in the background. And then him. My phone buzzed again. Another message. He tried to push past them. I rubbed my forehead. "Seriously?" The typing bubble appeared. "Yeah." Then another message came through. He kept saying he needed to talk to Lila before the ceremony. Of course, the last-minute confession. The emotional speech. The big romantic interruption he probably thought would change everything. Except real life doesn't work like a movie. And Nolan's brother apparently had zero interest in letting it. Tyler sent another update. The brother told him he already knew about the letter, and that if Evan took another step inside the venue, he'd be escorted out. I couldn't help smiling faintly at that. Some men are very good at protecting their families. Evan apparently still tried anyway. Another message buzzed through. He started yelling about how nobody understood the situation. Said he deserved to speak before she made a mistake. I stared at the screen. Even after everything, part of me still struggled to comprehend the level of entitlement required to show up at someone else's wedding, convinced you were the main character. Then came the final message from Tyler. Security escorted him out. I leaned my head back against the couch cushion and closed my eyes. For a long moment, I just breathed. The chaos I had been expecting had happened exactly the way I thought it would. Apparently, the story didn't end there. Another friend texted me an hour later with additional details. After security removed him, Evan had apparently stayed in the parking lot for almost 40 minutes, just sitting in his car, waiting, maybe hoping someone would come out and call him back in. Nobody did. The ceremony started on time. The music played. The guests took their seats. And inside that building, Lila walked down the aisle toward Nolan, the man who had read a 3-page love letter from another person and still stood there calmly, ready to marry her. The wedding went on. From everything I heard afterward, it was beautiful. Lila cried during the vows. Nolan's speech made half the room emotional. Their first dance was to a song they'd apparently been joking about since their second date. Evan saw none of it. By Monday, the entire situation had spread through the social circle like wildfire. Showing up uninvited to someone else's wedding after sending them a love letter tends to generate conversation. The narrative shifted quickly. At first, people had sympathized with Evan's heartbreak. But heartbreak loses its romantic glow when it starts crashing other people's weddings. Lila cut contact completely. 20 years of friendship gone overnight. Group chats were rearranged. Mutual friends quietly stopped responding to Evan's messages. Even his sister, the one who had lectured me about compassion, stopped defending him after hearing the full story. The most interesting reaction, though, came from Nolan. He didn't make a public post. He didn't start drama. He simply sent a message to a few close friends clarifying the situation. For the record, he wrote, Lila ended that relationship 4 years ago, and Evan has refused to respect boundaries ever since. Trying to disrupt our wedding was disturbing. I hope he gets help. Not exactly the romantic ending Evan had imagined. About a week later, I received one more message, a number I didn't recognize. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Evan. Apparently, he had decided to try one last time. The message was surprisingly short. I know you think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I want you to know I really did love you. I just loved her more. I'm sorry that hurt you. I read it once, then again. There was something almost fascinating about the honesty of it. Not kind, not self-aware, but honest in a strange, blunt way. He probably believed that sentence, that he had loved me, just not enough, and that somehow explaining that made things clearer. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Then I set my phone down and went back to what I had been doing before the message arrived, making dinner in my quiet apartment, music playing softly in the background. Here's the thing about situations like this. People often ask if you feel angry, or bitter, or vindicated when the person who hurt you eventually implodes their own life. But the truth is much simpler than that. What Evan felt for me was never love. It was comfort, safety, the emotional equivalent of a waiting room while he hoped something better would open up again. And what he felt for Lila wasn't love either. It was obsession, jealousy, the inability to accept that someone he had once lost had moved on and built a life without him. Real love doesn't show up at someone else's wedding in the middle of a fantasy. Real love doesn't keep backup plans. I'm not dating anyone right now. Not because I'm broken, just because rebuilding trust takes time. My therapist, yes, I started seeing one after all of this, says I handled the situation well. Apparently, recognizing a red flag and refusing to negotiate with it is healthier than trying to fix something that was never stable in the first place. She might be right. All I know is that sometimes relationships don't end with dramatic fights or long conversations. Sometimes they end with a text at midnight, and a wedding invitation that quietly reveals exactly who someone has been the entire time. Evan wanted me to understand his feelings. I did. I understood that his feelings had never really been about me at all. And now that I see that clearly, moving forward feels a lot easier.